um, did this the other night with JD, and the whole thing, as soon as we got started, it just locked up.
No.
I had to get out and send him a link and start over. So, is it pissing down rain in Mississippi like it is here?
Um, Pissed rain like Wednesday. I was out of work for like a week and a half because of snow, and then
Hmm.
it rained Wednesday, and they're like, "Go home," and we're like, "Great." Yeah, it's sprinkling now, but God, I need to be spring. It's bad.
Dude, I've been kicked in the head by weather for about a week and a half now. It's awful. Like I talked to a friend of mine in Mississippi last week and asked him if he would write something for me. I was applying for a job. I needed a letter of recommendation, and he's like, "When I can get out of the house." He's like, "Yeah." I was like, "I don't know if I can pull it off." So, but yeah. Um, so I'm going to start how I start with everybody else. Just you give me your background in writing, how you came to be where you are today. You can talk about MFA. You can talk about your childhood. Just start where everybody starts, just at the beginning.
All right. Stephen King. When I was 11 years old, um, my mom let me read one thing, and it was Secret Window, Secret Garden from 4 Past Midnight. My fifth grade teacher was a big fan, and she was like, "Yeah, you should read Stephen King." I'm like, "Yeah, I'm like 12, weird." But I read because I got my mom showed me Stand By Me, and I loved Stand
Mhm.
By Me. Watched the Secret Window movie with Johnny Depp, and I was like, I should read them. And, I was a big reader in a way. I read Lord of the Rings in fourth grade. Very advanced reader for my age. Just loved reading. Um, and reading Stephen King like fourth grade going into fifth grade, I was like, oh, this is really good. This is like
Mhm.
fantastic. And from that one novella, I tracked down as much as I could within reason. My mom, was a little like cagey about how much I could read, and ended up being I smuggled it from the library. Um,
Yeah, yeah,
my dad didn't care because he was being a dad.
yeah,
Shout
yeah.
shout out to him. My mom found out and she was livid. Um, she put it in her hiding place in the kitchen. I knew she hid things from my sister, and I knew where it was, so I
Yeah.
would just sneak and read it. Um, and I just was enamored by how well Stephen King could create a world with just words
Mhm,
that were
mhm.
easy to read but very immersive. And I think it was, I want to say probably sixth grade. I was reading his short story. I mean, it was to the point where I would get my weekly allowance and beg my dad after he got home from his cable job to drive me to the bookstore so I
Yeah.
get like another paperback of Stephen King because I was just a junkie at that point. And I think I was reading Everything's Eventual for the first time, some short stories. And I thought, if this guy can do it, Steven,
Yeah.
I was stupid. I was young, naive. If this multi-million-dollar writer I've been doing for years can do it, I can do it.
Mhm,
And
mhm.
so I think maybe 12, 13 years old, I wrote my first short story. Um, they were obviously Stephen King ripoffs. Like, if I'd gotten anything published, then I would have gotten a lawsuit. But I learned, I mean, yeah, I mean, flattery is, imitation in the form of flattery, right? But I was
Yeah.
young. I didn't know anything. I didn't have ideas. They were gory, violent stories. I wrote a vampire novel that was
Mhm.
clearly it, but a
Yeah.
vampire.
Yeah.
But I learned that I had fun doing it.
Yeah.
Um, and I was, writing a longhand, 20-page stories at my desk, sharing them with friends. They read them. My mom found my notebook of stories and encouraged me to keep doing it. Um, which my parents love them. God love them. They didn't deter me from writing. They didn't say there's no money in writing. They really were gun ho about making me want to write
Mhm,
and keep writing.
mhm.
And so I
Yeah.
mean I wrote consistently like a lot in middle school. Again, it was Stephen King ripoff stuff, right?
Yeah.
But I had fun doing it. And then it wasn't high school. I found Raymond Chandler in The
Mhm.
Big Sleep, and I wrote ripoffs of Chandler as you do when you're 16, 17. Kept writing, kept reading a lot. But it wasn't until I did a 1 year at Missouri State University in Springfield. I had two great creative writing professors. Uh, and that's when I discovered Carver. And I wrote
Mhm.
this story called Bringing It All Back Home, which is going to be my upcoming book. It was one of my first things published when things kind of clicked for me as a writer.
Mhm. Mhm.
Um, Writing people that I knew, that I grew up um, with my own voice. I wasn't ripping off Stephen King anymore.
Right.
I was, Michael Pritchett, one of my professors I had at UMKC, told me, well, every writing, you steal somebody at some point.
Yeah. Yeah.
So Carver, I think, was the bridge that got me from a wannabe writer to a writer. Um, and then I did, I finished my undergrad. I minored in creative writing. I wasn't the best writer, I don't think. I was, in that Cormac McCarthy phase, trying to be, artsy and flashy.
Mhm.
And so I went back to my roots with more Carver stuff. And in 2020, but before the pandemic happened, I got accepted to the University of Mississippi's MFA program because I wanted to go there. I read Tom Franklin's book, Poachers,
Yeah.
and the story. It was the Ballad of Dwayne Juarez, about
Mhm.
the guy who puts the cats in the trunk and things that happen after that. And I was like, I need to learn from this guy. So I worked hard on my portfolio. I made sure my stories are good. I've written some good stuff in undergrad, but I don't think nothing clicked yet. I don't think
Mhm.
until maybe 2019. I got waitlisted at two places, didn't get in Mississippi. Took stock, rewrote things, reapplied, got in, and the program really helped me with revising.
Okay.
I hadn't had a story published going to the program until I learned to trust the revision process, right? And I
Mhm.
mean, I feel like most writers, you think you're hot shit, you think you're good, that I don't need to revise as much, but you do.
Mhm.
And I needed Tom Franklin to have one of my stories highlighted, like he cut his wrists,
Yeah.
to be like, okay, I got the bones, where's the muscle?
Yeah.
And um, being down here in Larry Brown country has done wonders for me.
Mhm.
Um, Go to the bar, meet Bill Boyle, Michael Farris Smith, Mary Miller. This town is really good for being a writer and a young one too.
Yeah.
So,
Well, that
yeah.
was one of my questions. I'm going to pop that up as the next thing. So you do live in a literary mecca for people from the South.
Hmm.
Um, and you're a graduate of the MFA at Ole Miss. So how much do those ghosts of those guys and ladies that have been like Donna Tartt and Willie Morris and Larry Brown and Barry Hannah, how much do they haunt that program? Is that still there, or is it more the Tom Franklins and the current professors? Like how much of that influence is still in that program? Because my cousin went there, Greg Brownderville, and he's a poet and he teaches at SMU now. So it's just one of those questions that I want to know, like how much of that's still there? Because Oxford as a place, because there's the ghost of Faulkner that haunts the whole
Yeah.
town,
Yeah.
So in a way, and you mentioned the bar, and I assume you're talking about City Grocery. It's there, you feel it when you go in. So I just kind of wanted to know your take on that. Like, what is Oxford as a place for writers, for those unlike us who haven't been there and felt it?
The program itself is interesting. I feel like it's mostly Faulkner and
Hmm.
more for the critical side. Like most of the PhD students I meet, they're doing American Lit are focusing on Faulkner. For the MFA kids, to give or take, my friend David, my best friend in the program, hadn't read like Larry Brown, for instance,
Hmm.
didn't know who Larry Brown was until I
Hmm.
told him who Larry Brown was. And we took a directed reading under Tom Franklin to read Larry Brown, which is great. That was a fun little semester. Um, Eudora Welty's kind of mentioned here too. I would
Yeah.
say it's more a culture for the visiting writers and our current faculty. It's a big deal when we get people like Disha Filia came my
Hmm.
last year, and that was huge. Um, Maurice Carlos Ruffin came a couple years ago. Um, and then, of course, the town itself, Square Books, brings a lot of cool writers in. We have Thacker
Hmm.
Mountain. So just, I mean, even if like, I feel like I don't know what it's like to be outside of the program if you're just like a citizen living in town, but like this town beckons writers at its call,
Yeah.
right? Like you can't
Yeah.
go 1 week without having a writing event around here, which is great.
Right.
And I
Yeah.
love seeing that. And I feel like being a student and being a writing student at that really, really does a lot for you.
Hmm.
Um, as for the ghosts, again, Faulkner's everywhere. I'm more of a Larry Brown guy myself.
Me too.
Yeah, my shirt actually is a Larry Brown face. So um,
I got to get that shirt.
it's I don't know I got it from a friend. I don't know where he
Yeah.
got it, but I traded.
Yeah.
It was a good trade. Good trade.
Yeah.
Um, it's interesting just because again, it's mostly just Faulkner love. I mean, we have the Faulkner Conference in the
Yeah.
summertime. The Spirit Books makes its name off Faulkner,
Hmm.
Faulkner statue. Um,
Well,
but
and you can do like me and get drunk at City Grocery and then stumble to his grave and just talk to him for an hour.
oh, I've done that. I've done that. Barry
Did
Hammond
a
is also buried in the same
Yeah.
cemetery.
Yeah, and I couldn't find his grave because I was in an inebriated state. But I'd also had an encounter with a ghost cat too. I don't know if you did
Oh,
when you were at Faulkner's grave. I'd been to the City Grocery and had a few Manhattans, and my wife and I had made it to the cemetery, which is just a maze to get into anyway, because you'll
yeah.
miss the entrance if you don't know what you're looking for. So we get in there and we find Faulkner pretty quick. You know, he's not difficult to find because he's actually in Apple Maps. If you punch it in there, it'll walk you right to the grave. So, and you know, it's eroded around
Hmm.
his grave, so you can like just sit on it. It's at perfect like chair level. And I was sitting there carrying on and babbling, you know, as you do, and I feel something like snaking between my legs. And I'm like, what is this? We look down and it's like this cat. And this cat's
No.
just like doing figure eights between my legs. And I'm sitting, and the cat stays there the whole time until I'm finished with, you know, whatever soliloquy I've got going there. And then it just pissed off. It just left, you know. And I always tell the story that maybe that was Bill just saying, all right, man, time to wrap it up. You know, I've heard what you got to say.
Did you bring him booze? Maybe he was asking for some whiskey.
Maybe so, because that's the thing, right? You bring some booze and people left coins everywhere, you know. But it is, there's a, I mean, it's so close to where I'm from. I can be in Oxford in 2 hours.
Nice.
And we went to Wilson, Arkansas last night, which they're trying to revamp that town. Somebody's come in and like literally bought the whole town, and they're trying to turn it into like a little cultural mecca, you know. And that's really, to me, that's the only little pocket of culture that I've got near me that is in anywhere close to what you've got there in Oxford. I feel like when I get to Oxford, I'm home in a way. And I think it's because of all the influences of all the people that have been through there, who have been to Square Books. Like everybody that's anybody has read at Square Books. Richard's
Yeah.
had them there. And then you've got Thacker Mountain. I mean, it's a place like no other place, and that's just the literary side. We're not even going to get in, like we will in a bit, because of who we are and what we like. We'll talk about this, but that's not even getting into the music and the other stuff that goes on in Oxford without even touching Ole Miss and sports. Right?
You're an
It's just
hour away from some of the best juke joints in the
yeah.
country in Clarksdale. I finally went to Clarksdale last semester.
Hmm.
Um, amazing. You know, you're in the. I forgot. You know, for 3 years into the program, I was just so wrapped up in my schoolwork that I forgot I'm in the Delta.
Yeah.
You know, I'm in blues country,
Yeah.
and God, it's a unique place to live. I think. You know.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah. And not only does it have the you know the amazing MFA program, but there's also the Center for Southern Studies there, right? So they tie
Hmm.
like almost everything together: the food, the music, the writing, and everything. So, I mean, not to turn this into an ad for Ole Miss, but you could do worse for a writer. I mean, it is, if you're from the South or you're from the Midwest and you're looking for a place where you can go and get so much in a place that still feels, and this does, I do not mean this disparagingly because I love Oxford. It feels like Mayberry, right? So it has that small town very much close knit feel. I kick myself every day that I didn't apply there, because that's
Mm,
something I have to go get secondhand, you know. Uh, but you talked about music and you've written music reviews on Poverty House. So how much does music affect what you do? I just read one of yours
mm,
yesterday. Getting ready for this. Don't worry, baby. Right? There's music all through that story, and that's a brilliant story, by the way. We can talk
thanks.
about that
Thanks.
too. That's a wonderful story. Uh, how much does music play in? Do you have a playlist? A lot of people do a playlist, and I can't because I've got to have it like silent when I'm trying to get something out. So I'm interested to see what other writers do with music.
Mm. Yeah, I don't write in silence. I have to have music playing. Um,
Hmm.
I wouldn't say I have a playlist. I will obsess over a song that kind of captures the vibe that I want to do for the story.
Hmm.
Most of the time, it's Bruce Springsteen. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, I got into Bruce Springsteen 2017, and just listening to him and the way he paints his worlds
Yeah.
did a lot for me as a writer. Um, but blues, I listen a lot of, Beatles helps me a lot. Country music, Esther Rose, who I wrote about for Poverty House,
Hmm.
Chet Baker did a lot for me as a song. I mean, I like, I like to include music in my writing just because, people like music, why
Yeah.
don't our characters listen more music,
Yeah.
I'm thinking about like, I read Rum Punch and rewatched Jagged Brown in the summer, and how
Hmm. Hmm.
Tarantino has Robert Forster get obsessed with that one song,
Hmm.
um,
Hmm.
"Didn't Blow Your Mind" by the Delphonics, and I'm like,
Yeah.
why don't we have that in more pieces of fiction?
Yeah.
You can make it be correlative, you can make it have a metaphor and meaning. I think it's fun to use music as a tool in writing, not only for like a craft method, but like thematic stuff.
Hmm. Hmm.
Like
I think
I
is it difficult because you can't like explicitly put the lyrics in there? You think?
sometimes I don't want to get a lawsuit, right? But I'll rearrange like I'll paraphrase it, like I think my title story for my collection, I write that the boss sing about the promised land highway. I'm okay, so I get you kind of slide your way by
Yeah.
it by not doing the lyrics.
Well, I did that with mine. One of my characters got in a car and she turned on the radio, and I wrote Jim Croce was singing about time. Like there's ways you can do it, but without explicitly, But I feel like that's not the best way to do it. Like sometimes the lyrics would do more than that would.
If I had the money,
Yeah,
they want like God, come on, like I can use if I'm writing like like a paper about the musician, I can use your lyrics for
absolutely.
fair use, but I can't use it for fiction.
Yeah,
Come
yeah,
on, man.
and one of those things. Yeah, I mean, we can get into philosophical discussion here, but I mean, one of those things is more real than the other one. I would argue that the paper would be more plagiarizing than the fiction would. I mean, because fiction is fiction, right? These
Yeah,
characters are living in a made up world, but we're choosing to have this music exist in this world, whereas the paper exists in the real world, and we are directly quoting it. No one is playing it, right? So I don't know how much mechanical rights are there, but still, that it's tough because I want to put music in books so bad sometimes.
yeah.
The novel I'm working on now, my main character's girlfriend listens to shitty country music all the time, like on like the oldies country station. And you just want to use, some lyrics to let people know exactly what song she's listening to, but instead you've got to like allude to Marty Robbins, or something like that. So it is difficult, but I find, and I think the people that go to Ole Miss, like you were talking about, I think that draws them there too, like the juke joints and the culture and Greenville and Clarksdale and um, I mean, Tupelo has a lot of good shows too, and that's not far. We saw Isbell in Tupelo 3 years ago. Um, so it
Close to
is
Memphis
kind of
too. I mean, Memphis is an
exactly you
hour and a half
did,
away.
yeah. Memphis in an
New
hour and a
Orleans
half.
is 5 hours away.
Yeah,
Nashville's 2 hours away. It's weird how close this small town is to a lot of the like culture hubs, you know?
Yeah, yeah. It is. I keep saying it is a place like no other place. I've got you talked about Larry Brown earlier, and Larry's come up a lot on this podcast so far. This is you'll be episode 4, and everybody I've talked to, Larry has kind of been that gateway drug to
Mm.
writing, and I don't know. I don't know if it's because he was self-made, or if it's because the realism that he was writing was so connected to what a lot of okay, we can have discussions about masculinity and stuff like that, but I mean, for I feel like for male writers, there's something that Larry did that if you weren't a reader, you could read Larry Brown and go, I understand what he's trying to say.
Yeah, yeah. I work landscaping right now, right?
Hmm.
Bunch of dudes, right? They're not big on reading. They call me a library boy at work because I read at lunch. Um, but I was talking to my boss. My boss. He's kind of a cool guy. He's like 35. You're driving around. He's telling me how he used to be a firefighter. I'm like, oh, you should read this book called On Fire by Larry Brown, Oxford native. I think you'd like it because one, he's not hard to read, which
Right,
again it isn't a tag on like your reading skill. It's just he's not showy,
right,
but he is
right.
poetic, right? He is
Yes.
a beautiful writer, but he's simple enough that okay, you just got to get the ingredients to cook it, right? You don't need
Hmm.
to
Hmm.
make it too flashy, and it's real,
Hmm.
it's honest. Um, the first book I read by Larry Brown was Facing the Music, which I think is a good
Yes,
introductory thing to read.
it is.
I was impressed by how experimental it is.
Hmm.
He gets weird in that collection, more
Yeah,
weird than he does in like Big Bad, right?
yeah.
Um, and it was like the boy and the dog story. The 5 lines, 5 words per line, were more
Yes,
compelling to me in some ways than things like Samaritan, which is a one hell of a story, or even
yes.
the title story.
Yep.
Um, and I like when Larry, let himself be weird while at the
Hmm.
same time retaining that kind of like honesty, that
Yeah,
brutalness, right?
yeah. Eh, So you've read Gene Cash's book, I'm sure, about Larry Brown,
I
the
haven't, but I
writer's
have
edge.
a copy, but I have not read the book yet.
So she mentions, it's funny you brought that up. She mentions, what is the name of the story with the fireman and the little boy? What is the name of that story? The 5 words in a sentence.
I think it's
I'm blanking on it right
boy,
now.
boy and dog.
Boy and dog. Yeah, I think that's correct. He so he writes that and he sends it in, and his editor sends it back, and she's like, I want you to make these changes, and he says, nope, can't do it. And she's like, well, I'm not sure this is doing what we need it to do. And he basically says it's doing exactly what we need it to do, because if I change this sentence, it will not have 5 words in it anymore. So in his
Mm,
weirdness, he was setting out to write these 5 word sentences to convey the point that he wanted to convey. And when you're reading it, I thought that, because I did not notice it when I read the story the first time. It was only after I'd read Cash's book and then went back and read it that I noticed, oh my God, all these are 5 words. They are all going on to the next thing. And I think his editor did the same thing, because when Larry's sentences were short, they were concise, but it wasn't, for lack of a better word, easy reading. He was doing some things with that made it more complicated than what it seems on the paper. And that's emotionally, that's craft work, that's just experimentally. He's doing so much stuff. And it blows my mind that here's a guy with no training other than the library. You talked about being library boy, right? Like he just read books
hmm
and taught himself through sheer force of will how to do that. And I wonder, is that so? You've got Larry and Barry and Tom, um, all those guys down there, and I wonder if that moment in time, where is that genre right now? Is it? Do you think that's going to have another moment, or was the 1980s and mid to late 90s the moment for that?
For like like the self-made writers, kind of like
Well, no, more for that. Lack of a better term, this dirty realism, this
mm,
the the Larry Brown oeuvre, right? If we're gonna term it anything.
it's a
It's,
very
har- it's hard to get it
hard
published
question.
right now.
I mean, again, I'm from the MFA program, right? And
Hmm.
I would say I was the only person writing kind of like grit lit,
Yeah,
in any capacity.
me
Not to
too.
say that my peers weren't doing anything that I was interested in. They were doing some phenomenal things I couldn't do
Right.
just because, I just not the way I do things.
Well, and I don't think
I
they get a lot either because that's what Sheldon said when I talked to him in episode one. He was one of my professors. And he's like, okay, here's a guy I connect with because he's doing the same thing because they're just, it's, uh, here's the thing with MFAs, right? At the core of it, it is trying to get you to write in a way, right?
Yeah.
In a certain way. And you can do that and I can do that, but it might not necessarily be what's in our heart and what we want to write. So I think for people like you and I that say, okay, this is what we do, there may only be one of us in a program.
I mean, I'm glad I was in this program with that. I mean, Tom Franklin was highly encouraging. Even my got my second semester, I had the visiting writer Maurice Ruffin, and I wrote a
Mhm.
story. It was my first published story, but with Rec and Review. Just like those Killing Floor Blues, about a dog fighter.
Mhm.
Whew, man, tough crowd. Okay, again,
Oh, in the
I'm
workshop.
not. Oh, okay. So Maurice and led a undergrad from his advanced fishing workshop into a graduate workshop, and she was like, "This is just like you gotta like." This is not my, you got to understand your audience. I don't like, well, you're not my audience though. You're like 19 years old. You don't,
Right.
not, you're my audience.
Right.
But they liked it. I did kill the dog in the first draft. That was my one mistake, was killing the dog. Um, Again, when I learned the revision process, don't kill the dog. Don't kill the
Yeah.
dog. Then it got published.
He's one of the
Um,
darlings you can't kill. You
yeah,
know, the dog.
dogs. No, whew, I can fight a dog. You can't kill it.
Yeah, that's right.
Um, I mean, like I would say to a certain capacity, like writers like Desmond Ward,
Hmm. Hmm.
Salvage the Bones is
Hmm.
pretty gritty.
Yeah.
Um, I would say like the big publishing. I feel like it's a risk to do meaner stories.
It's a risk. Okay, so I had one that I was proud of that I finished a week and a half ago or so. And I sent it out to the six or so that I thought would take it. Man, it boomeranged on two of them, just right back. It's too violent. It's too violent. And I don't think it's violent in the way that they think it's violent because the violence is implied.
Mm,
It's not explicit on the page, but the character is going through some things that make him make the decisions that he makes. And the violence is just as a result. He doesn't physically harm anyone, but the world around him is a violent world. And at the end, he's just trying to get out of it. So um, there's still four left. I'm hoping it gets picked up somewhere, but it's one of those things, like you say, like if the audience, I wonder, sometimes judges the book more, to use a bad cliche, judges the book by its cover more so than trying to deep read it and figure out, okay, what is this character or that character explicitly going through that's making them make the choices that they're making, or why is the world around this character the way that it is? And that can be difficult to overcome, you know. I find, have you read Laura McHugh?
oh, yeah, I've met her.
Have you really? Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
I do this thing called River Pretty's right under the street in Southern
hmm.
Missouri, which if
Hmm.
you're in Missouri, recommend doing it. It's fun. But she was a visiting writer there one
Yeah.
time, and I read What's Done in Darkness was
Hmm. I
fantastic.
read the Weight of Blood, The Wolf Wants In, and it's grittier stuff. I mean,
Yeah.
it's with what Woodrell does. I find it right there. So I think what I'm getting at is maybe, and JD and I had this same conversation, JD Clapp, on the last episode. Maybe in order to get it to a more mainstream market, should you think we should pitch to crime or thriller, somewhere around there?
Mm, that would make sense. I feel like it'd be easier to market. I mean, because I feel like publishers, like it's all about how can we market this book, and I feel
Hmm.
like it's harder to market, like Joe,
Right.
Then it would be to market, like Sean Cosby's books.
Yeah.
Great writer, but he's very much in a crime vein. And it's
Yeah.
easier to kind of like sell a crime fiction story than like, here's a gritty vibes country
Yeah.
story.
But I do think it's having a moment. I mean, I know Eli Craner, and I know he did
Yeah.
Don't Know Tough, and he's got Ozark Dogs out now and Broiler coming. And what Eli's doing is a grittier form of crime fiction, and I'm hoping that allows more people into that space. There's another Arkansas writer, Kelly J. Ford, who wrote Cottonmouth.
Hmm.
Um, and there's space, I think, for everyone in there. It's just finding the right agent, finding the right publisher, and somebody to get behind it and kind of rally. Because, as you know, and I know from school, publishing is a hard nut to crack.
Yeah.
Uh, because you got five people controlling the gate.
Yeah.
There are five publishers controlling the gate. And in a way, I think that's why I started this up, because there are people that Big Five might not be for them, but that doesn't mean their work is not worth being highlighted, or they shouldn't have a forum to talk about what they do, because there's a lot of exciting stuff going on in indie lit right now. And I think highlighting that and just giving people a voice to talk about their work is a good thing to do, because we're all paddling on the same creek.
Yeah. Yeah.
So let's talk about process for a minute, because I'm always
Oh.
interested in how people write, where they write, when they write. Because do you have a set schedule? Because I get up at 4:30 every day. I can't promise you I'm going to write at 4:30, but I will read, or I will read something academic, but they're just, I have this term you'll hear in episode 2 and 3 that I call exorcism writing. I coined that term in my MFA. They're like, well, how do stories come to you? Well, almost fully formed, where I have to like get them out, in one go. And then I'll go back and revise and edit. But for the most part, the story comes fully formed. So a lot of times I'll be sitting in here and nothing comes, so I'm not one of those, I'm going to get 500 words a day. I'm not going to get 1,000 words a day. There may be days where I get 250, and they're a good 250, and I'm happy with it. So I'm always interested to see how other people go about that. So what's Colin's magic?
Oh man. I'm like the laziest writer I know. I will read every day, right? I will
Uh,
read minimum 60 pages a day.
mm-hmm,
I will just sit and I loved having these snow days. I mean, I work a pretty fucking hard job on the
mm-hmm,
body, 6 a.m. to 2:30 a.m. daily. So it was nice. I just read 4 books, loved it. Didn't touch the page once.
yeah,
Which is, what I did do a lot of revising the last month of some old stories, mostly for Adam, mostly for myself. The way I go about it is I have a list on my notes app of story titles.
mm-hmm,
I'm like, oh, this is a good title, and they just kind of be out of nowhere. I like to keep a good title. I'm a big title guy,
yeah,
but I usually kind of like base the writing on the title. If that
mm-hmm,
makes sense. If I'm
mm-hmm.
like,
No, I get it.
okay, this idea, ooh, this could be a good story, but I need the title, and I'll like flip through my notes app, like, okay, that's the title. That now we got the title, we can go, and I can get one image, and I get one image from the scene down pat. I can get the story done pretty well.
Mm-hmm,
The last story I wrote, I had my friend Casey Stegman read it because I wanted to submit it to some crime magazines. Um, the title was Like a Good Irish Catholic,
mm-hmm.
which I like that title.
It's a good title. Yeah,
Thank you. And the
yeah,
image is of a girl, not a guy. They want to write more female protagonists,
mm-hmm,
wanting to kill or avenge the death of her Irish mob connected father in Cane City at this bar. And the image of her just in the bar drinking whiskey with a gun in her back pocket, waiting for him to come in. Okay, okay. What's the title? What's the title here? I'm like, okay, let's get Catholicism here, like a Gaulish Catholic. Let's go, let's go. And it took me a week to write it. I ended up writing 3,000 words in a sitting because I wanted to get it out.
mm-hmm.
That was emotionally exhausting.
The irony of
3,000.
the irony of the exorcism, right? Like you're writing this Irish Catholic story, and you're exorcism writing, right? You got to get it out.
3,000 words, man. I mean, it's hard enough for me to get like 500 words on a good day. I got
Hmm.
3,000 words. I was like, God, all right, I'm taking a nap for 2 hours, please. And
Hmm.
I think it's a
Hmm.
good story. It's fun. It's pulpy. Um, gets pretty violent at the end. It's kind of funny. Um, yeah. So I mean, I when I got into the program, it was during COVID, so everything was online.
Hmm.
S- Classes, teaching, reading was all on the screen, and my eyes were just killing me. And I didn't want to the last thing I wanted to do was write on my computer after being online for 8 hours a day. So I bought a typewriter and loved it. Works wonders. You can't edit, you can't change anything. You just have to finish the page.
Right.
And I haven't used it lately, but when I do, if I'm struggling, if I find myself struggling a lot more with my writing, I will write the draft on the typewriter. Just go, get it
Yeah.
out, and then not edit it. Don't touch it. And as I reapply it onto my computer, I'll edit as I go.
Okay.
And I found that really helps me with part one of revision, kind of like cleaning up, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
And it makes my writing a little more tactile.
Hmm.
I can
Yeah.
smell it, I can see it, I can feel it.
Yeah.
It's a little hipster, I guess. People make fun of me for doing it, but it's fun, and
I
it's
don't. I don't think so.
people
I mean,
people write longhand. It's the same thing. It's
yeah.
just it's
Yeah.
kind of I need to get off the screen for a little bit, you
Yeah.
know.
Because everybody prints it out anyway at some point.
Yeah,
So, and you talked about King earlier, and I know you've read On Writing, as big of a fan as you are, but that's his thing. He prints it out, he puts it in a drawer, he leaves it, what is it, 60 days, 90? He gives a number in the book. I think it's 60 days where he doesn't touch it or look at it. And then he'll pull it out and he'll go through with the red pen and mark it up and retype it. And there's something to that. I
yeah,
learned that early on because, like you said, sometimes you can sit down and you can write a story and you can go, "This is the balls, man! Like this thing is kick ass." And then you put it away and you come back to it and you go, "Okay, I've got to do this here. I've got to do this here. I've got to do this here." And I think a lot of our, not to disparage anybody, but you've been on Twitter long enough to know that there are quote unquote writers out there, that mainly they're on Twitter just to bitch about writing. They they don't ever put anything up that, where people are like, "Oh, that's great. Like we support you. We do this." It's always like the worst part about writing is writing. Those people, and
what else
I
is
just
new?
wonder,
Like,
yeah,
duh.
yeah, right. So I just wonder if I don't want to be a writer is somebody that can take stock of their own work. I think you write it, and if you're proud of it and you love it when you write it, you should still be able to put it in that drawer and come back to it and edit it and make it better, to where
Yeah,
at some point you've got to go to your colleagues and say, you have to read this because I'm tired of looking at it,
yeah,
and then that is kind of the layman's workshop. If you don't have a background in MFA or you've never understood the horror of having a story workshop, I think that's what amateur writers have got to learn how to do, is having somebody. And you snicker, so maybe we should talk about that because we've both been there, right? So if you were just telling somebody that's outside of academia, right, what is the worst part of the MFA? The answer is probably workshop.
yeah.
And tell everybody why, and then we'll pick it apart.
God. Um, I mean, it's all subjective, right? Like, I I had worse experiences in undergrad workshop, right?
Uh-huh. Well,
When I
because
was at
nobody knows what they're talking
well,
about.
where I went to undergrad, University of Missouri, Kansas City, we had my 400 little English classes were half and half, undergrad and grad student,
Okay.
which I thought was stupid.
Mhm.
But a grad student called my work to workshop in front of everybody
He said
on
you were
sour.
two
No,
workshop.
yeah. So we were yeah. He said not just to me, but the entire workshop as a workshop, my piece. He calls it unsalvageably trite, and I'm like, bro, that is fucking mean. Like, come
Yeah.
on, man. That's
Yeah.
not that's not constructive. That's
Yeah.
not helping me. That's not doing a thing for the story. It's kind of attacking me as a writer, and it's like we're not
Well,
here for that.
the other thing, and I'll let you go back to that answer, but just for the people that are listening, in most workshops, you can't say anything. Like you're just sitting there, like in the corner, while other people get after your work.
Which thank
Yeah.
God. the Ole Miss was like, no, if you can interject,
Mm,
you can talk, you can help guide it. It's not just because when you're just sitting there getting like kicked, it's like it's not fun. I'm in the
no,
room.
right.
I'm in the room,
Yeah.
guys.
Yeah.
It's my title story for my collection, which was published. Nothing ever happens if I ever stay.
Hmm.
Was called Sexist because it features the narrator and his friend pick up his lady hitchhiker, and the narrator's friend hits on her, and she rebuffs him, and he pushes her into like a garbage can and maybe kills her.
Okay.
And it's like, okay, yeah, he's sexist, but am I?
Yeah. So
I'm. I
that's
mean, I like to write about bad dudes doing bad things,
100%.
and it's my professor was like, thank God, was like, no, I think it's anti-sexist. Um, I get it. I get where she was at, but then she said like her favorite writer was Haruki Murakami, and I'm like, okay, you want to
Hmm.
talk about that? Let's,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean, the way he objectifies women in his stories, but neither here nor there. Workshop in grad school was a bit better. There were some days I was like, oh my God, like they fixate on the things I don't need to be fixated on.
Yeah.
Um, Sometimes people were asking to be a little too nice. And it's like,
Hmm.
well, do you want me to critique your story or do you want me to just tell you it's good?
Hmm.
Um, it kind of, I mostly listened to the professors. Like Tom Franklin had great ideas. He had great ways to look at the story to what he would do on your draft is he would like plot out your story.
Okay.
It's like, yeah, you have the first 3 pages are set up. Okay. Then you have 2 pages of backstory. Okay. Okay. So you kind of stop the story. Why do you stop the story here? Let's move it up here. I'm like, oh, okay. Let's look at it like scientifically, mathematically. Let's analyze it that way. And I thought that helped me out a lot more than just this paragraph isn't working for me. Okay.
Hmm.
Well, why? My friend David had a much worse experience in workshop than I did. And I feel like a lot of it is you're coming from we're very different. It's like 12 students and they're all different. They all read differently, they all write differently. And I feel like if you are unlucky enough to have a story that does not hit someone the way you wanted to hit, they're going to read it in a bad way. And it's not a slight at them, it's just their prescriptive ideas what the story needs won't be beneficial to you. And that's one downside of a workshop is that your ideas might not help me out.
Right. Right. Because like you, okay, now I can speak to that because you were in Mississippi and I was in Minnesota. So you can tell the cultural background is going to be lot different from the people that are coming to that program that would probably be coming from, the area where we live now. You're from Missouri, but that's not so far removed from Mississippi. Regionality. I think some of the people that are coming to Ole Miss probably share a little bit of the same background. We had we had some people who couldn't understand not that they didn't appreciate what I was writing, it's that they didn't get the intricacies of what I was trying to do. Like I mentioned to Sheldon when he was on here, I used the word papaw in a story, and I had a girl literally say she didn't know what a papaw was. And I just wondered, can you not figure it out from context, like who papaw is in the story? And it's just the little southern things that people might not get that I would put in there. And then you had the other people, and I don't know if you had this, you had the people, everybody's got the overly florid person that wants to really show off what they can do. But did you have anybody that you felt was just there to shock people, like to just submit something that was just
Yeah.
so off kilter that you're like, are you trolling us? Like, um,
I wouldn't say trolling. I would say
there's
this
so many
person's
different
mind worked.
people. Yeah, there's so
Yeah.
many
I mean,
different people that are. I think every MFA has a version of the same people. I think
the
so.
MFA program here, which I love, is very diverse.
Mhm,
I have a lot of like New Englanders, a lot of
mhm.
West Coast. We've got international students.
That's awesome.
My year we had a lady from China in the poetry field. Um, it's very, very varied. I mean, I would say I was more of an outlier being from the Midwest, in
Really, that's
which,
interesting.
yeah, in which, like I wrote about bar time a lot. I don't know if you guys
Yeah.
have bar time. Yeah, like your
Mhm.
clock at a bar is 15 minutes late,
Yeah.
and people are
Yeah.
like, they do that. Like, yeah, it's to get you the fuck out of here so
Yes,
they can
exactly.
close. And
Exactly.
I had to explain bar time to them for like 10 minutes, and they're like, oh, yeah, okay. But
Yeah.
there was the one student who I wouldn't say she was trolling us. I think she just had a vision, and the vision was very, 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 very different than what most people were writing about. And I admired her perseverance to write whatever the fuck she wanted.
Yeah.
It was
Yeah.
nothing I would write, which I
Mhm.
like because I don't want to read in a workshop when I'm writing. I
Yep.
get a little jealous, you know. I'm like,
Yeah.
ugh, no, I want to write about that stuff. Um, and I don't think anybody in workshop I don't think any two were the same.
Mhm.
Even my friend Dave and I were close enough but different. He's writing more about war experience and coming of age than what I'm writing about, right? But this girl, woof, weird sci-fi sex doll stuff, and I'm like, fucking
Yeah.
weird.
Yeah.
Love it. It's
Yeah.
strange. It's weird. It's different. I don't know how much of a hit it was with everybody else. But I was like, you have a vision. Go
Yeah.
for it.
That's
Love it.
kind of where I was because um we had like there's a guy submit like some kind of transgressive fiction, you know, and it had some really I'm going to use the word questionable themes in it,
Yeah.
you know, and some of the other students were just like wearing, not really wearing him out, but I mean, they were really questioning where it was going. What is the point of this? Does this exist just to exist? And then I think one thing that an MFA does, and I think you alluded to it there, is it really helps you critique something that might not be for you, but you can see where they're going, like what they're
Yeah.
trying to do. So my critiques were always like, you do that thing that you do when you write a review where you're like, while this may not be for everyone, i.e. me, right? I understand this, and this of where you're trying to go. And you've done that wonderfully, right? Like there's the way around that. And I think sometimes if something is so far out of your field of vision or out of what you do, um, it can be, I think you take it way too personal instead of just looking at it for what it is, which at the end of the day is art. You can like it, you can not like it. Uh, but in not liking it, you have to, one thing that workshop process does teaches you how to write an objective book review. And it teaches you how to understand other writing that, like you said, is foreign to you, because I don't want to go in and only read what I'm doing, because
Yeah.
I've learned more from other people. You learn little tricks because everybody's a thief. So you learn like, okay, what can I steal from this? Because that's really well done. And they might be writing about, like you said, robotic sex dolls or, some weird transgressive perverted shit. But if you understand, like we were talking about earlier, if you understand what's going on in the story more so than what the story is, then I think that can help you, especially be a better reviewer,
Yeah.
which we need more of. We need more people like that review books for what they are more so than what they think they say. So let's talk about books. We are in a way fraternity brothers. Both of our books are going to come out in the same year on the same press.
Hell yeah,
So
man.
that's exciting, and we are close. So if we don't do one together, if we don't do an event together, I think we fumbled the ball in some way. So tell me about the collection of short stories. Nothing good ever happens in a flyover state. And kind of tell me where the concept of stories, where the concept of these stories came from, kind of what the overall arching theme of the book is, and what made you go with a collection, um, more so than a novel, because everybody knows collections are harder to sell for sure if you're trying to sell them to the big five. But I love a collection of stories because I think it gives you an overarching view of what somebody can do. So yeah, I'd be interested
Yeah.
to hear about your book and how excited you are about it, because I'm excited about it.
Yeah. It was my thesis project. I started a novel my first semester, wrote 70 pages on my typewriter, and then hit a brick wall like boom. airbag, everything.
Mhm.
Shelved it, put it away. It's still away. I got to start over from scratch. But I've been writing short stories since, 13 years old. Love short stories, love reading short stories, love writing short stories. In many ways, I prefer the short story as a genre to
Mhm.
write, just because you can get weird enough in a short burst of energy, right? You can allow yourself to do snippets. I like, little vignettes, little slices of life. These are little small novels, the way I like to look at them. Because like you pack a lot of information in a short story.
Mm.
The
I look
ties that bind, right? Like I
I
have a
look
lot
yeah.
of shit.
Mhm. I look at
Um,
them as like an album almost. Yeah.
yes,
Yeah.
yeah, like okay, so Nebraska and
Mhm.
Dark Side of Town, I think, are
100%.
in many ways short story collections in
Yep.
song format, which really kind of influenced the collection. Um, Basically, it's all set in and around Kansas City,
Okay.
and Kansas City's fascinating because in 30 miles you can go from a city to the suburbs to the country,
Mhm.
like that, right? And how everybody from those backgrounds are completely different,
Yeah.
and it's a weird little location. And I kind of went divergent in Nebraska and Kansas a couple of times, but mostly they're all Missourians.
Mhm.
And Missourians are very stubborn.
Mhm.
We're nice
Mhm.
people, but we're fucking weird and we're
Yep.
stubborn. And we will plant our feet into the clay and not
Yeah.
move.
You are very different from Iowans. You're very different from the states that touch you. I know that from experience. Yeah, 100%.
Yeah,
100%.
yeah.
It's that show me, just
Um,
kind of show me attitude.
Show me
Yeah.
state, and again, and I'm coming from Jesse James country, right?
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
that whole shadow. Um, And so my collection, a lot of it's dealing with mostly it's male characters. I told Adam, hey, let me write two, three more stories with some female protagonists, kind of make more well-rounded. Um, I don't want to make it too much of a sausage fest, right?
Yeah.
Um, because women read more than men do in a way. But
Yeah.
it's mostly men, and it's them kind of having to get over this stubbornness that is detrimental to their life. Like the ties that bind, I think, might be the centerpiece of the story collection, in which like it's about. I don't know if you read that one from Record Review. Got a lot of love when it came out, but about a guy who his half brother comes out of prison, is like, I need a place to stay. He's like, oh, fuck, fine,
Mhm.
okay. He hated his father, and this guy's like, I remember his dead father's like, great, this guy's in my life now. And at the same time, he's growing his tomato plants. It's winter. They're getting ready to die, and he has to overcome this bitterness that he
Mhm.
has like rooted himself, which he does. And I am so glad I let myself have a moment of tenderness, because I've been called a bleak writer.
Yeah.
I don't want to be
Yep.
bleak.
Yep.
Some of these stories in my collection are going to be bleak, and that's why I like to have a little bit more moments of, I don't want to say niceness, but beauty in a very
Yeah.
stubborn world, right?
Yeah.
And I mean, the collection is called "Nothing Good Ever Happens if I Ever State," which isn't exactly true. Some of the things that happen in the story collection are going to be good,
Mhm.
right? It's going to be about people trying to carve out a little bit of happiness and what they perceive is a miserable existence.
Right.
I mean, some of the stories are gonna be downers. The dog fighting story, downer. It's a downer. Um, there's one published by Bull, after a Bob Dylan song. Takes out to laugh, takes a turn to cry, is a downer. But a lot of the stories have these small little pockets of like, oh, okay, there's gonna be this springtime after this winterness, right?
Mhm.
Because the Midwest is bleak by nature. Wintertime
Yes.
in the Midwest is fucking abysmal.
Yeah.
Everything's
It
gross, brown, dead, and then you have those short bursts of spring. And I'm trying to capture this kind of like dichotomy, right?
well, it makes what we're going through right now look like child's play. We're complaining about the weather and, at least it's not like 10, 12, 15 below. Uh, I do get what you're saying about bleak because my novel is kind of the same way. It is full of And I don't let me forget, because I do want to talk about female characters too, because I want to understand how you do that, because I had to do it myself. But my novel's full of wholly unlikable people.
Mm,
Almost every character is a flawed character, but they all have, no matter who they are, they all have some redeeming quality. Um, and I think that's what keeps you turning the pages. So you can be bleak, because I'm a firm believer that it does not matter how shitty a person you are or how shitty your life is. Inside, I'm not really sold that everybody's just completely evil.
yeah,
Like,
yeah,
unless you are just a stock standard sociopath or psychopath. I think every quote unquote normal human is going to have some iota of goodness in them, no matter how flawed they are. And I think by highlighting that, I think that kind of connects with people. So I dig what you're saying. Like, if you can connect to this flawed individual, and you can see it, like the dad in your story and Don't Worry Baby, right? Like, he's got flaws. Like, that story is basically, hey, here's what's going to happen, bud. And by the end of it, you start out feeling one way, and then at the end, like, you get it all at the end in that last paragraph, or at least I did. And I think doing that, you can not only show something totally bleak, but you can show there's hope kind of in any kind of
yeah,
situation.
yeah.
So female characters, I mentioned that. So I have two really crucial female characters in my novel that I had more fun writing than the men, especially one of them. And I don't know if it's because it's so far out of my comfort zone, or if it's because uh, I was raised in a single parent house with a mom, so I know how women talk, and I know how women act when they get angry, and I know, I've got a strong wife, and I understand what she goes through in a business world, and I think it's just, but in a way, you get imposter syndrome when you're writing women too,
Hmm.
or female
Hmm.
characters. So, how do you approach writing a female character, and how do you know as a man that you got it right?
I workshopped my only one I have so far. It's called Nebraska. And I was gonna make a third person, but I was like, no, I like her voice.
Hmm.
And she's like, like from the Ozarks, so she has like more like a dialect than like my other characters. And I'm like, this is
Hmm.
kind of fun. She's fun to write. She has interesting ideas and opinions, and the way she perceives the world is more unique than I have my male characters perceive the world, which I thought was interesting for me to do. And I workshopped it, and my fate, I would say, split, 6 dudes, 6 guys, and 6 gals, and they didn't think it was bad,
Yeah.
which is like, okay, whew, I passed
Hmm.
the test. And again, I was close to my sister. We're
Hmm.
close. My mom and I are close. So I have a lot of women in my life I'm close with. We got a lot of strong female friends. Um, and I just don't know why it took me so long to write a female protagonist, but I liked it.
Hmm.
I don't really have like a method to go about it. I just write like what a dude.
Yeah.
I just Here's a lady's name, and
Yeah.
let's see what goes with it. I'm not gonna try to write things I have no business knowing about. I'm not gonna write, like women problems to an
Hmm.
extreme,
Right.
but I do like to have in a world that my writing is very dominated by masculinity in a way. I write about it a lot. I write about it in a way that to examine it. I mean, I
Hmm.
work with a lot of dudes who are a little too comfortable in their masculinity. And it was interesting. The story that I've written, and it's the longest I've story in the collection. She's dealing with a man child, wannabe criminal, and she has to like come to terms with,
Okay.
okay, what was so exciting about this guy to begin with, and how the fuck do I get out of here now? And I
Hmm.
liked
Hmm.
writing that because I mean, I wouldn't say she's timid the entire story, but she makes a choice at the end, which I was like, yeah, you go, girl, you do
Hmm.
that.
Hmm.
You break that cycle, you get the fuck out of there. And I liked it. I
Yeah.
mean, spoiler alert, she kills her boyfriend who's gonna sell her out to like these
Hmm.
drug dealers out of them after them. And one girl in my workshop was like, "We need more stories with the girl kills the guy." I'm like, "Yeah, we do.
Yeah.
Do it." It was fun to read because like I just read Megan Lucas's collection of short stories,
Hmm.
Here in the
Hmm.
Dark.
Hmm.
Breathtaking collection, amazing. Um, would love more grit lit by women writers because I would like to read more
100%. Yep.
so I can
100%.
include more characters like that in my work. That
Hmm.
won't they'll never be as authentic as Megan's characters, but I don't want to just write about guys, because
Yeah.
um, if I would just write dudes in my stories, I'm neglecting a big part of Missourians, which
Hmm.
are women,
Yeah.
strong women at that. My entire family, my grandma, my mom, her sisters, my dad's mom, all strong women,
Hmm.
all had to work to their fucking bones to get by, and not once they complained. The men complained all the fucking time.
Yep.
They never
Yep.
did, and I always
Yeah.
thought that was just something I want to kind of capture. You know?
I do. I've written women and children, and like you said, the women are fun because you can end up rooting for them. At the
Yeah.
end, like one of the in my novel, one of the characters, the first time you meet her, you're like, "What a bitch! Like what a gold digging bitch!" And by the end of the story, like you feel sorry for her, like you want her to overcome, what she's trying to navigate. And then I think I do well with adolescents and teens because I can still kind of put myself in that mindset when I have to. Adam took one, he took Yankee Dimes in the spring, and that's a female protagonist, um, 17, 18-year-old girl. I've never been a 17, 18-year-old girl, but I've known some, and I've ridden around with some in high school. And I know, I kind of know the inflections and the way that they talk. And I just tried to channel that for that story. And that story was workshopped in my MFA. And that was one of the things, kind of like you said, that it got compliments. And okay, I believe the voice is authentic. Right. Like I believe that this is how Sadie talks. I believe that this is what she's feeling in that moment because she was very much a Ree Dolly kind of character from Winter's Bone. Like she had a shitty daddy who might or might not have been a hitman in this country town, that was like hauling off bodies to the dump. But she's helping him take the trash out, and she kind of discovers that along the way. And I felt like, okay, if I can make that work, then I feel like I've at least accomplished that task. And then the second story that I submitted in that class was ended up being published by The Dead Mule, and it was about a little boy who, his parents were drug addicts, and he comes home to find them dead in the house from school, and that was the story with the papa. And Sheldon told me, he said, it is very hard to write from a child's point of view and pull it off. But I feel like you've done it. And I think what made that special was because I channeled a lot. My dad's dead, but he didn't die of a drug overdose. And my mom's fine. But you can understand kind of what that is, that uncertainty of being 11, 12 years old and the world being so big that
Hmm.
when you come home you think they're asleep, and then you go next door and there's that impending doom and all that of his papa's kind of telling him in a roundabout way that maybe everything isn't all right. But it I don't find it difficult to do what we've just talked about there, but I would have an issue of trying to write. I don't think that I could write an entire novel that I felt was completely authentic with a first person woman narrator.
Yeah,
You
neither
know?
could I. Bill Boyle, though, I learned a lot reading
Mhm.
his work. He writes women amazingly, um, more so than most dude writers I've read. Um, something I aspire to do because like every book of his has a main female protagonist, and it's like she's fucking
Yeah.
damn. This is
Yeah.
good.
Yeah.
Um, I've read some bad ones, right? Murakami can't write a woman to save his fucking life. I love Murakami, but he he can't. He just can't. Um,
I think our
Chris Offutt,
experiences with him
can.
were the same. Yeah. Chris Office.
I
Yeah. Yeah.
Chris Evans great. He and I are buddies actually. He's like I'm like his little gopher. It's actually kind of cute. Another reason I came to the program was for Chris Offit, and he retired. So I was like,
Yeah.
damn, I think to have you in my committee. But he and I like have become like friends. I like go over his house, have him do yard work, we'll like cook dinner.
No shit.
It's amazing.
So
It's
I
we'll
got
like sit on his porch, smoke a cigarette, and like, yeah, this day sucks. Like, yeah, fucking man.
so I got that. I don't know if it's gonna flip it right. Out of the Woods. I got that at Square
Yeah.
Books the other day, and it's sneakily signed. So I opened it up and I was going through it, and I'm like, well, fuck me, Chris has signed this book. Like, how kick ass is that? Because of paperback, I don't ever expect those to be signed. And I got home and I was looking at it and I was like, holy shit, that's wonderful. Because Kentucky Straight was a big book for me. That was
It's good. It's
that's a
good.
great book. Um, and God, I just love Chris. I don't think he'll take this in any way as a he's so wonderfully weird with what he does. Like, it's just, I
He's
love
a
it.
weird man in person, and I love it. He gave me this for graduation.
The Bobcat? Is that a
Yes,
Bobcat?
it's a stuffed bobcat. He was like, "Yeah, I'm cleaning my house out. Happy graduation, man." I'm like, "Oh, thanks." But he is the nicest man. When I told him that I got my book got accepted by Cowboy Jamboree, it was like
Yeah.
a proud dad moment, you know?
Yeah.
I was like, thanks, Chris. I was like, I'm so proud of you, man. This is great. Nothing better than your first book. I'm like, oh, thanks,
Yeah.
man. That's it. No, I'm moving out of Oxford in the summertime because I miss the Midwest too much, and I'm gonna
Yeah.
miss Chris Offit so fucking much.
Yeah.
He has been a fun guy to hang out with,
Mm.
you know.
Well, I hate to hear you're moving. That puts you further away. So,
Yeah, it's just I've been here for 3.5 years. It's
yeah.
time.
And when are you moving?
Probably in July. My lease ends then, so
We will have to get together before then in person for sure. Are you going back to Kansas City?
yeah, at least outside of there, I'll figure it out.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's not too far. We're still going to operate in the same circles. And then hopefully whenever these come out, we'll be able to maybe get together and do some stuff together. That would be awesome.
I'm excited, man.
Get Chris to come.
Oh, he will. He will.
Yeah.
I'll force him to. I'll force him.
So
Drag his ass out of his house.
yeah. So we always end with the same question, right? Like, who would you invite to dinner, living or dead? 3 authors, and what would you serve those people? What's your go-to there? Who are the people you're inviting to your house in Kansas City for your Arthur Bryant's barbecue?
Raymond
Or
Carver.
is it going to be barbecue? It could be anything.
It's gonna be LC's barbecue. That's the best barbecue
Okay.
in town.
All right.
It'd be Ray Carver.
Mm-hmm.
God love him. If it wasn't for him, I wouldn't be writing as good as I am. I don't think.
Yeah.
Flannery O'Connor.
Yeah.
Big fan of her. I'll probably just say Stephen King just because he got me on the track. You know,
Yeah.
I'm doing this bullshit because of him. I blame him. You know,
Yeah. I blame Ron Rash. That's who I blame.
Ron Rash, man. Love my Ron Rash.
Oh, okay, he's the nicest man. I said that on that first episode. Like, I did not expect him to just give me his phone number and say, "Hey, call me." And
Oh shit.
it was awesome. He for a grad student to talk to Ron Rash for an hour was just because the story that got me hooked was Hard Times in Burning Bright.
Burning Bright is
yeah,
damn good.
and The Ascent.
The Ascent.
The Ascent is the story that made me write the story that I was talking about the little boy that we were
I
talking
thought
about
it
earlier.
sounded, okay.
Yeah. So, I mean, if you can't see the influence of The Ascent on that story, it was, and it's just everything that he does is so rich with region and rich with characters, and the dialogue always rings true. Yeah. Ron Rash is probably my Stephen King. If you had to have a Mount Rushmore, you'd have like Ray Carver, Ron Rash, Larry Brown, Barry Hannah, and I like Eudora Welty. I won't lie to you, like I do. You said she gets a mention down there, but I like Eudora Welty a lot.
Yeah, she's big. Just because Jackson, we did a lot of wealthy studies. I didn't take any classes for her. I've not read anything by her.
Really,
Shocking. I know. I know. It's a blind spot in my reading. Been meaning
uh,
to.
A Visit for Charity is a good short story. It's really short,
Okay.
and she writes it as a teenage girl, kind of as a Girl Scout who's going to do some community service at a nursing home,
Okay.
and it won't take you long, but she does a lot in that story. Uh,
Okay.
with the way she does the descriptions of the old ladies, the descriptions of the girl, it's kind of got an um, Alice Walker feel to it.
Okay.
It's a cool story. I'd recommend that one.
All
So
right.
we're having what was the barbecue?
LC's.
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 LC's. Okay.
Next to a
Are you,
junkyard, so you know it's good.
you know it's good. Are you going to you are going to AWP? You're
Yeah.
gonna you're
Not going to the conference proper,
proper.
probably,
Yeah.
but I'm going to show my friends Casey. They've been
Mhm.
talking to Casey for 3 years now. I
Mhm.
got to show them all my favorite bars. So, and then I
Yeah.
got the reading for
Yeah.
Cowboy Jamboree, which is gonna be, I think, gonna be fucking fun. I'm excited for that.
I, I do too. I'm still trying to find a way to get up there, but we've got something with the kids that weekend, and I'm trying to make it
Uh,
work. And I've not ruled it out completely, but I may gate crash. I don't know. I can't shell out the amount of money to go to AWP proper. Um, but I think for me, all the fun stuff is outside of it anyway.
yeah.
All the after hour stuff.
Well,
But so
come to Oxford Conference of the Book in March.
I'm coming. Yeah,
That's
coming
it
coming to
was
that.
last year. There was gonna be the Noir at the bar. Sean Cosby, Ace Atkins, Megan Abbott, right?
Yeah.
Eli Craner, but tornado warning happened, so that got
That's not
canceled.
that's not out of the ordinary for
But
Mississippi.
so instead, it was me, Mark Westmoreland, Bobby Matthews, James Hanna, Rob Smith, Sean Cosby, Eli Craner, Megan Abbott, Ace Atkins drinking at the Inn at Ole Miss during a tornado watch / warning, and I think that
Awesome.
was as fun as one at the bar. It
I've
was
never met
quite
I've
possible.
never met Ace, but everybody speaks so
Ace
highly of
is
Ace.
fucking fun. He's another nice guy. Everybody in town, writing wise,
Mm,
Michael Ferris Smith, Mary Miller, Bill Boyle, Ace Atkins. The ones outside the program, right? Not that the
yeah,
program writers aren't fun, but just there's so many writers in this town, and they're all so nice and so welcoming and understanding. That's something I'm gonna miss is
yeah.
having that at the bar. I won't have that in Kansas City.
Well, let's do that. Let's hook up at the conference of the book, and we'll try to get as many
Absolutely,
of those wonderful people together and have a hell of a night. There's plenty of places to do it there.
absolutely.
So, so people can find you online at Twitter, and it's at Colin underscore ism. Right? Is
Yes,
that a play on
yes.
colonialism?
Play on Colin on communism, actually.
Communism. Okay,
Yeah,
it was one of the two. But
Colin's stick was taken. So
Colin's sick. I love that. Well, if we've had a dive into colonism today, it's a way I want to live. So that's awesome. So hey, we've only got to wait a month. If that's in March, right? The conference for the book. That always
yeah, I know. I
happens
think
in March.
it's the first weekend of April.
Okay. Yep.
Yeah, yeah. The way it
Well,
falls this year.
by then we should have a better idea when our stuff's going to come out, and
Yeah.
we can really try to nail down some future plans, which would be a hell of a good time.
All right, man.
All right, brother. I thank you for doing this.
Absolutely. They've had me on.
All right. We'll try to stay dry.
I will. I think it's done now. I don't know. Who knows?
All right, man. I appreciate you so much.
You too. Yep.
All right, bud. All right. Bye bye.
Take it easy.
Uh huh.
Bye.